They cut her mic mid-sentence. She tried to keep going until she realized it wasn't broken. Someone turned it off on purpose. And then the room went quiet. And if you just look at the dates on page 4, you'll see the foundation report was. Click. No one spoke. For a second, Nia kept speaking. Like her voice might come back if she didn't stop. It didn't. The mic was dead. She tapped it. Once. Twice. Nothing. Nia looked up. And that's when she realized. None of them looked surprised. The chairwoman was already looking past her. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Your time is up. I still have 40 seconds, Nia said. Without the mic, her voice sounded small. Like she didn't belong in a room like this. The timer was still green. I haven't shown you the photos. I have proof the inspectors were paid to. A soft ripple of laughter broke out from the front row. It wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than a scream. It was the sound of people who had already decided Nia Brooks didn't matter. They didn't even see her as a threat, they saw her as an interruption. Next speaker, please, Sterling said, her eyes fixed on the back of the room. Mr. Henderson, if you're ready? Nia gripped the edges of her manila folder so hard the cardboard began to tear. Her face burned. She looked at the audience, 50 people sitting in plush chairs, and felt a crushing weight in her chest. She had spent months digging through archives, losing sleep, and risking her job to find the truth, and it was ending because of a technical glitch that felt a lot like a trap. Please, Nia tried again, her voice cracking. Just one more minute. Ma'am, sit down, a security guard muttered from the side. He didn't move, but the threat was there. Nia started to turn away, her shoulders slumping. She felt invisible. She felt like the world was moving too fast, and she was being left behind in the dust. She had the truth right here in her hands, but she didn't have the power to make them listen. But then, the air in the room changed. In the very back row, a man who hadn't moved once during the entire meeting slowly stood up. He didn't say a word. He didn't scuff his chair. But the moment his tall, lean frame rose, the room stopped breathing. The laughter in the front row died instantly. The chairwoman's hand, reaching for her water glass, froze midair. It was as if a predator had just stepped into a room full of prey, and everyone, even the people in charge, knew it. The man in the charcoal suit didn't rush. He stepped into the aisle with a slow, predatory grace. Every eye followed him. He didn't look at the council. He didn't look at the guards. He looked straight at Nia. Mr. Jang? Sterling's voice wobbled. The sharpness was gone, replaced by a frantic, high-pitched nerves. We weren't expecting you. This is a routine hearing. We would have prepared a seat for you at the front. Jun Min didn't stop until he was 10 feet from the podium. He stood in the center of the aisle, his posture as straight as a blade. I prefer the view from the back, Jun Min said. His voice was a deep, smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. It's easier to see the strings when you're standing behind the puppets. A councilman on the far left coughed nervously. Mr. Jang, I assure you, we are just following the bylaws. The bylaws, Jun Min repeated. A small, cold smile touched his lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly where the secrets were kept. Is it in the bylaws to cut the power to a microphone the moment someone mentions a violation? It was a technical glitch. Sterling insisted. The equipment is old. We've already called the technician. But as I told Ms. Brooks, her time has officially expired. We must move to the vote. Jun Min tilted his head. He didn't look at the clock. He looked at Sterling. You're done listening? He asked quietly. We have a schedule, Sterling stammered. We have to be efficient. Jun Min walked toward the front. Nia felt a wave of expensive cologne and cold air as he passed her. He reached the podium and didn't wait for permission. He reached out and gripped the neck of the microphone. With a sharp, sudden twist, he adjusted it to Nia's height. He didn't call a technician. He didn't use tools. He just looked at the technician in the back booth, a single, dark look that made the man's hands shake. Suddenly, the red light on the mic snapped back to life. The speakers hummed. The glitch was gone. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. A reporter in the front row dropped his pen, the plastic clicking against the floor, but nobody moved to pick it up. Everyone was waiting. Jun-min stepped back, but he didn't leave the podium area. He stood right next to Nia, his presence acting like a wall that the chairwoman's glares couldn't cross. He was much taller than Nia, his shoulder almost brushing hers. "You said the time was up," Jun-min said, turning his gaze back to the council table. "Yes," Sterling said, her voice tight. "We are moving to the vote now." Jun-min paused. He looked at the news cameras in the front, then back at the council. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Then you aren't running a meeting," Jun-min said. The words were short and sharp. "You're skipping the truth." He leaned into the microphone, his voice booming through the hall like thunder. "She's not finished." A pause stretched out, long and uncomfortable. "You just don't want her to be." The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight. The chairwoman opened her mouth to argue, but the look in Jun-min's eyes stopped her cold. She looked at the cameras, all of them now focused on the mysterious man in the charcoal suit and the woman with the folder. If they cut the mic now, it would look like a confession. "1 minute," Sterling whispered, slumping back in her chair. "Fine. 1 minute." Jun-min stepped back. He turned his head and looked at Nia. His dark eyes were intense, searching hers. He didn't offer a smile, but he gave her a small, almost invisible nod. "The room is listening now," he whispered. "Don't waste the silence." Nia felt the adrenaline surge through her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just a girl from the neighborhood with a story nobody wanted to hear. She was the woman a mafia boss had stood up for. She opened her folder. Her hands were still trembling, but they were steady enough to flip to the page with the highlighted dates. She looked at the council, and this time, they weren't looking at their watches. They were looking at her. And they were terrified. The silence in the room was no longer empty, it was pressurized. Every camera lens in the hall was trained on the podium where Nia stood, shadowed by the towering presence of Jun-min. The chairwoman, Mrs. Sterling, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floorboards, but the red recording lights of the news crews kept her pinned to her seat. 1 minute, Sterling repeated, her voice thin and reedy. "Ms. Brooks, you have exactly 60 seconds before we move to the final vote on the Building 402 redevelopment." Nia felt a surge of heat in her chest. For months, she had been a ghost in this building. She had been the woman waiting in the lobby, the person ignored in the emails, the interruption at the end of the meeting. But now, with Jun-min standing beside her like a wall of cold iron, the power had shifted. She leaned into the microphone. This time, there was no feedback. No crackle. Just the clear, steady sound of a woman who finally had the floor. "You're in a hurry to vote because you've already spent the money," Nia said. Her voice didn't shake. It was sharp, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You've already promised this land to developers who don't care about the people living there. But you can't vote on a lie." "Ms. Brooks, watch your tongue," a councilman warned, his face turning a deep, angry purple. "This is a professional hearing." Jun-min didn't move an inch, but he tilted his head slightly toward the councilman. The man's jaw snapped shut instantly. It was the kind of silence that only comes when a predator reminds the prey that they are being watched. "She's not finished," Jun-min said again. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the room. He let the words hang in the air for a long, uncomfortable beat. "You just don't want her to be." Another reporter in the second row dropped his pen, the plastic click echoing like a gunshot. Someone in the back stopped whispering mid-sentence. The tension was so high that it felt like the air itself might shatter. Nia didn't look at Jun-min. She kept her eyes locked on Mrs. Sterling. I have the inspection reports. I have the proof that Building 402 was marked as safe on Monday and condemned on Friday, with no repairs in between. You didn't find a foundation problem. You found a way to make a profit. This is an outrage. Sterling shouted, finally finding her voice, though it lacked its usual authority. These proceedings are closed. Security, clear the... The cameras are still rolling, Sterling, June Min interrupted quietly. He gestured to the wall of phones and news cameras. If you clear the room now, you aren't just clearing a meeting. You're confirming a crime. He looked back at Nia, his dark eyes unreadable but intense. Show them, he commanded. Nia reached into her folder. Her hands were steady now. She wasn't just Nia Brooks, the girl who over-explained. She was the woman who was about to break a city council. The tension relief flashed back, explaining how Nia found the truth. As the council scrambled to respond, Nia's mind flashed back to the moment this all started. The how of it was much less glamorous than the now. It had started 3 nights ago in the basement of the city records office. The basement was a labyrinth of yellowing paper and the smell of damp concrete. Nia had been there for 6 hours, her eyes burning from the dim fluorescent lights. She was the only person left in the building besides the night janitor, who had already checked on her twice with a look of pity. You won't find anything in those old crates, kid, he had told her. The city keeps the good stuff locked in the digital servers. They keep the clean stuff in the digital servers, Nia had whispered to herself. The mistakes stay in the paper. She had been looking for Building 402, the place where her grandmother lived, the place the city said was falling apart. She found the first document tucked inside a mislabeled folder. Inspection report, March 3rd. Result, structure sound. Foundations perfect. Her heart had skipped a beat. If the building was safe on the 3rd, why did the eviction notices go out on the 10th? She kept digging, her fingers turning gray from the dust. At 2 a.m., she found it. A second report, dated March 10th. It was signed by the same inspector, but the conclusion was completely different. Result, immediate danger. Foundation cracking. Condemn immediately. There were no repair logs. No work orders. No reports of an earthquake or a flood. Just 7 days of silence, and then a death sentence for the neighborhood. Nia had realized then that she wasn't looking at a mistake. She was looking at a forgery. She had stayed in that basement until the sun came up, taking photos of every page, her hands shaking so hard she had to retake the shots 3 or 4 times. She knew if she left the originals, they would disappear by the next morning. She had tucked the papers into her bag, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had spent the next 48 hours practicing her speech in her bathroom mirror, using a hairbrush as a microphone, trying to find a way to make the numbers sound as scary as they actually were. She had practiced the calm version, the angry version, and the desperate version. But standing here now, next to a man whose silence was louder than her loudest shout, Nia realized that she didn't need a version of herself. She just needed the truth. She laid the 2 reports side by side on the podium. The dates were highlighted in bright, neon yellow. They were impossible to miss. Explain the 7 days, Nia challenged the council. Explain how a building goes from perfect to public danger in 1 week without a single brick moving. The humor/humanity beat, showing the contrast between Nia's private struggle and the public stakes. Nia stood at the podium, staring down the council, but for a split second, she wasn't in the marble hall anymore. She was back in her cramped bathroom, 3 hours before the meeting started. She had been wearing her power suit, a blazer she'd bought on sale that was slightly too tight in the shoulders. She had held a wooden hairbrush in her right hand, pointing it at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Members of the council, she had whispered, her voice cracking instantly. She cleared her throat and tried again, deeper this time. Listen. I have the facts. If you vote for this, you're voting for a lie. She shook her head. No, Nia. That's too aggressive. You look like you're starting a fight. She tried a softer approach. She looked at her cat, a fat ginger tabby named Marmalade who was currently grooming himself on the bath mat. Marmalade, imagine you're a corrupt official, Nia said, leaning down. Imagine you're Mrs. Sterling. I'm going to tell you about the foundation cracks, and you're going to be so moved that you'll stop the redevelopment immediately. The cat had stopped licking his paw, looked at her with pure judgment, and then walked out of the room. Great, Nia sighed, her shoulders slumping. Even the cat thinks I'm a disaster. She had spent the next hour trying to find the perfect strong posture she'd seen in YouTube tutorials. She tried putting her hands on her hips, but she just looked like she was waiting for a bus. She tried crossing her arms, but she looked like she was pouting. By the time she walked into the community hall, she had memorized 4 different versions of her opening statement. She had a nice version, a factual version, and a brave version. But the moment the lights hit her and she saw the row of cold, expensive faces, every single version had evaporated. She realized then that practicing confidence was like trying to practice being tall. You either had the ground beneath your feet, or you didn't. And right now, with June Min standing like an unshakable mountain beside her, the ground felt more solid than it ever had in her bathroom. She wasn't the girl with the hairbrush anymore. She was the woman with the truth. The bureaucratic wall, explaining why the system is designed to crush people like Nia. The city council didn't win by being right. They won by being fast. Nia watched the chairwoman, Mrs. Sterling, shuffle her papers with trembling hands. The woman was trying to find a way to regain control of the clock. This was how the system worked. It was a machine built to move so quickly that the truth couldn't keep up. If a citizen was too slow to speak, they were cut off. If a document was too long to read, it was ignored. If a question was too difficult to answer, it was tabled for a later date that never came. The council relied on the fact that most people had jobs, kids, and lives. Most people couldn't spend 6 hours in a basement looking for a misfiled folder. Ms. Brooks, Sterling said, her voice regaining a bit of its jagged edge. While these documents are interesting, they have not been verified by our legal department. We cannot delay a multi-million-dollar project based on papers found in a basement. They aren't just papers, Nia said. They are your own signatures. The process must continue, Sterling countered, looking at the other council members for support. We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We are moving to the vote. That is the system. It was a wall of politeness and procedure. It was designed to make Nia feel like she was the one being difficult. Like she was the one breaking the rules by pointing out that the rules were being used to steal people's homes. Nia felt the familiar panic rising. The machine was starting to hum again. They were going to ignore the yellow highlights. They were going to ignore the forgery. They were going to vote, and by tomorrow morning, Building 402 would be a memory. She looked up at June Min. He hadn't said a word during her explanation. He had just stood there, watching the council with the detached interest of a scientist watching bugs in a jar. He didn't look panicked. He didn't even look angry. He looked like a man who knew exactly how to break a machine. The system is only fast, June Min said, his voice cutting through Sterling's rambling, because no one has ever been brave enough to put a hand in the gears. He turned his gaze to the news cameras. If they vote now, every person watching this stream will know that the city council considers procedure more important than fraud. Is that the headline you want tomorrow morning, Mrs. Sterling? The chairwoman froze. The fast system had finally hit a dead end. The air in the room felt like it was charged with electricity. Mrs. Sterling was looking at the clock, her eyes darting back and forth like a trapped animal. She was looking for a way out, a loophole, a reason to hit the gavel and end the nightmare. Nia felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. She had hundreds of pages of notes. She had months of anger. She wanted to yell, to explain every single lie she had found in that dusty basement. But she remembered what June Min had whispered to her just moments ago. One sentence. If she rambled now, she would lose them. If she got emotional, they would call her unstable. The system was waiting for her to make a mistake so it could snap shut again. Jun-min leaned in, his voice so low it was almost a vibration. They're waiting for you to fail, Nia. They think you're going to give a speech. Don't give them a speech. Give them a choice. Nia took a deep breath. She looked at the news cameras, their lenses glowing like eyes in the dark. She didn't look at her notes. She didn't look at the hairbrush she had practiced with. She looked at the row of council members who were hoping she would just go away. You have 2 reports in front of you, Nia said, her voice amplified by the now perfect microphone. One says the building is safe, and one says it's a death trap. She paused, letting the silence grow until it was uncomfortable. If you vote to tear it down today, you aren't voting because of a foundation problem, Nia said, her voice dropping to a cold, steady level. You're voting because you think the people inside don't matter as much as the profit you'll make from the dirt they stand on. The room went completely still. A reporter in the front row stopped typing. The chairwoman's mouth opened, but no sound came out. It wasn't a speech. It was an accusation that no one could ignore. Jun-min stepped back, a shadow of a smile playing on his lips. He didn't need to shield her anymore. She had found the one weapon the council couldn't defend against, the simple, unvarnished truth, delivered without a single stutter. Nia felt a strange sense of peace. She had said it. She had put the hand in the gears, and for the first time in years, the machine had stopped. The fallout was immediate. The council members began whispering frantically to each other. One man in a blue suit was pulling at his collar as if it were choking him. Mrs. Sterling tried to bang her gavel, but the sound was weak and hollow. This is a gross oversimplification. Sterling sputtered. The redevelopment project is about progress. It's about bringing jobs and luxury housing to a district that. It's about building 402, Nia interrupted. She wasn't waiting for her turn anymore. It's about my grandmother. It's about the families who have lived there for 30 years. You called them hazards so you could call yourself saviors. She picked up the 2 documents and held them high, turning them so the cameras could get a clear shot of the mismatched dates. March 3rd, safe. March 10th, condemned, Nia read aloud. In 7 days, nothing changed in that building except the price of the land. If you take this vote now, every person in this city will know exactly how much a neighbor's life is worth to this council. The efficient machine was broken. The reporters were no longer just watching, they were shouting questions. Mrs. Sterling, is it true the inspectors were pressured? Who signed the second report? Was there an independent audit? The chairwoman looked at the crowd, then at the cameras, and finally at Jun-min. He hadn't said a word during Nia's final push, but he didn't need to. His presence was the shadow that made the truth look even brighter. He was the reason the guards hadn't moved. He was the reason the cameras hadn't been turned off. We will delay the vote, Sterling finally whispered. Her shoulders slumped. The pearls around her neck seemed to weigh her down. The matter is referred to the ethics committee for an immediate investigation. A cheer went up from the back of the room. Nia's neighbors, the people who had been ignored for months, were standing on their chairs. Nia didn't cheer. She just set the papers down and stepped away from the podium. She felt exhausted, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. She turned to Jun-min. He was already moving toward the exit, his charcoal suit blending into the shadows of the hallway. He didn't wait for the applause. He didn't wait for the thank yous. Nia followed him out, leaving the chaos of the meeting behind. She had delivered the truth, and now she wanted to know why a man like him had helped her tell it. The heavy oak doors of the community hall swung shut behind Nia, cutting off the roar of the crowd. Inside, the council was still scrambling, their voices high and panicked as they tried to explain away the forged documents to a swarm of reporters. But out here, in the marble hallway, the air was cool and silent. Nia's heels clicked against the polished stone. Her chest felt light, as if a physical weight had been lifted off her lungs. She reached the top of the wide stone steps leading down to the street. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the wind pulled at her hair, but she didn't move. A sleek, black sedan was idling at the curb, its engine a low, hungry growl. Standing beside it was Jun Min. He wasn't looking at the building. He was leaning against a stone pillar, a small flame dancing in his hand as he lit a cigarette. The orange glow illuminated the sharp, dangerous lines of his face for a split second before he snapped the lighter shut. Nia walked down the steps, stopping a few feet away from him. "The vote is delayed," she said. Her voice didn't sound like the girl who practiced in the mirror anymore. It was steady. It was grounded. "They're calling for a full forensic audit of every redevelopment file from the last 5 years." Jun Min took a slow drag, the smoke curling into the night air. He didn't look surprised. "They aren't auditing," he said, his voice a smooth, dark baritone. "They're currently sprinting to their offices to shred every piece of paper that hasn't been photographed yet. But it won't matter. You've already given the digital copies to the 3 largest news networks in the state." Nia tilted her head. "How did you know I had digital copies?" "Because you're smart, Nia," Jun Min said, finally turning his gaze toward her. His dark eyes were unreadable, but the coldness she had seen in the meeting room had been replaced by something else, a flicker of genuine interest. "And smart people don't walk into a lion's den with only one exit." Nia stepped closer to the car. "Why did you do it? You said you had financial interests, but a man like you could have just bought the council. You could have bought the building and silenced me in an hour. It would have been cleaner." Jun Min flicked the ash from his cigarette. "I have enough buildings. What I don't have is people who know how to stand their ground when the world is trying to sit them down." He moved toward the open car door, but stopped, looking back at her over his shoulder. "You were shaking at that podium," he said quietly. "Your voice was cracking. You looked like you were 1 second away from a total collapse." Nia looked down at her hands. "I know. I felt like a disaster." "No," Jun Min countered. His voice was firm, almost like a warning. "You didn't look like a disaster. You looked like a threat. The only reason they cut your mic is because they were terrified of what you were going to say next. Bullies don't silence people who are weak, Nia. They silence people who are right." He slid into the back seat of the sedan, the tinted glass hiding him from view almost instantly. "Keep the folder," his voice drifted out from the darkened window. "Something tells me building 402 is just the first lie you're going to uncover. And when you find the next one, make sure your mic is turned up." The car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the city traffic like a shadow. Nia stood on the steps, the manila folder tucked firmly under her arm. She wasn't the girl who overexplained anymore. She wasn't the girl who was afraid of the silence. She was the woman the city was finally forced to hear. And as she looked at the glowing lights of the council building behind her, she realized she was just getting started.